Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Good evening and a very warm welcome to yet another session of Global Festival of Oneness 2021, celebrating Shankara, celebrating non-duality. Let me begin with a small prayer. Ishwaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Shri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Shrutismriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Today we have a very special guest, Smt Neema Majmudar ji, who will be speaking about what does Shankara teachings mean for us today in the post-COVID world. For the benefit of the viewers, a very short and brief introduction to Neema ji. Neema ji has a unique combination of personal background, international exposure, and education and depth of spiritual knowledge, which makes her an inspiring writer and teacher of Indian philosophy. She has studied Indian philosophy, especially Advaita Vedanta, with Swami Dayananda Saraswati ji, who was the founder of Asha Vidya Parampara and a contemporary teacher of Advaita Vedanta. Since 1999, Neema ji has been giving conferences, conducting seminars, retreats, etc. across the world in, in both the domain of personal development as well as in philosophy. In addition to her traditional Vedantic studies, Neema ji has a number of years of experience as a professional with the United Nations in the field of economic and social development in New York, Thailand, Fiji, and other places. She and her husband Surya Tahora have co-authored a number of books, including the Living the Vision of Oneness, which expounds the ways in which the vision of Bhagavad Gita and the Veda can be utilized in daily life. Thank you, Neema ji, for immediately agreeing to do this session, and we are all looking eagerly for your insights, especially at a current time when the pandemic is raging everywhere, and we are all looking for one or the other way to cope with it. Please start your session.
Namaste, Nitinji, and thank you very much for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to come here. And we have association with Hari Kiranji for many years, so we are very happy to partner with Advaita Academy for many different programs. So today's you offered many different topics, and I really thought that this is a good topic because it's a very contemporary issue. So I thought that, okay, let me just think about how does this teaching, what lessons it has for contemporary times. So I would like to start by saying that Adi Shankaracharya always said that Shruti is a pramana. So that means it is Upanishad and Bhagavad Gita. The teaching belongs to Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. But he is a very critical, important link in the Guru Shishya Parampara. So there is the verse that you actually chanted the last, Sadashiva Samarambham, Shankaracharya Madhyamam, Asmadacharya Paryantam, Vande Guru Parampara. So that is it shows that actually the tradition is the script from the scriptures, and the scriptures themselves are from Sadashiva. Sadashiva is Lord, because there is no really a human being only removes ignorance. A human being doesn't actually create knowledge, right? So that means we have so many discoveries, even in science. Nobody created the law of gravity. Nobody made time and space relative. It was already there, and the world was already functioning. What did these scientists do? They just removed the veil and they saw the reality. So this is why in our tradition, every knowledge belongs to Ishwara. And this knowledge is very, very important because it is Paravidya, and that also belongs to Ishwara. And we have scriptures which reveal the nature of knowledge. Scriptures are pramana, the means of knowledge to know this reality. And Adi Shankaracharya is an extremely important link because he has written commentaries on Upanishads. He has written commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutra Bhashyam, and these commentaries are so critical. Because Upanishads are cryptic and it's very difficult to decipher what they are saying and to reconcile everything. And it's the commentaries of Adi Shankaracharya which have done the brilliant job of expounding and also defending the Advaita tradition vis-a-vis many other profound thinkers. So we have a great respect for Adi Shankaracharya. And so one thing that we need to now ask, that what is it that the scriptures are talking about, right? So Advaita, this is not my topic. I have to go to COVID, which seems to be unrelated, but I do want to put it within the context of the teaching, right? So the teaching itself, which is Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, if you ask what exactly is the purport of this whole teaching, so this is where Brahma Vidya is what is taught, right? Now, what does Brahma Vidya mean? Brahma Vidya has three pillars of inquiry. One is, who are you, right? The second is, what is the nature of the universe? And the third is, what is the nature of the cause of the universe? So that means there are three pillars of inquiry: Jiva, Jagat, and Ishwara. Me, Ishwara, the cause, and Jagat is the universe. Now, what is this inquiry? Why is it called Advaita Vedanta? Because you start with three pillars, but as you begin to inquire into the three, they all actually, end up in one reality, which is Brahman, which is Satyam Jnanam. So it is not the scope of my talk to show you how these three pillars actually, actually end at the irreducible reality of the final, which is irreducible reality, Brahman, which is the final truth of all three, Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. Now, so according to Vedanta, which is Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, and this whole study, it includes Prakarana Grantha, it includes Brahma Sutra. So what basically what it then means is that if everything collapses into one reality, everything else has to have a dependent reality. So that is what we call mithya. So what is the relationship? The relationship is between Satya Mithya is one has an independent reality, the other has a dependent reality. So the simple examples are given, which are very simple. So I don't want to go into it very much, but I want to create a context, right? So the simple example is Vacha Rampanam Vikaro Namadheyam Vrittika Ityeva Satyam. So Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad shows you a certain relationship between pot and clay. And what they say is that it seems as though there are many pots, but in reality, there is only one clay. So what is the relationship between clay and pot? Pot is Vak Arampanam. It is a name for a given form, but Mrittika Ityeva Satyam. The reality of one pot or 1,000 pot is only one clay. Why? Because the pot has its entire being in clay itself. Before the pot was born, there was clay. While the pot exists, there is only clay. And after the pot goes, there is only clay. So this is where you can count 1,000 pots. But in terms of reality, if you count the reality, there is only one clay, and that is the truth. So similarly, this whole Jagat, which constitutes of time, space, and object, and if you begin to look at it in terms of the final content, it goes into Brahman, and everything else is Mithya, and Brahman is Satya. Now, if this is the case, it may seem as though if the whole Jagat is mithya and what the Brahman is the independent reality, and Brahman in itself does not depend upon the universe and itself is limitless, Satyam Jnanam Anantam, it is existence of the nature of awareness, which is limitless, it is attribute free. Anything that happens within the world of forms does not touch Brahman, then you may think, oh, if in that Brahman you are, that is also our reality, not just some Brahman out there, right? So if that is the case, you can argue, and it may seem to us that, hey, the world is a mithya and the world will keep having many different events. You can have wars, you can have pandemics, you can have violence, you can have so many different things going on in the world. World is always changing and it has all kinds of characteristics and it is unpredictable, and all kinds of challenges keep happening both at a macro level and also with reference to our personal life, and that will go on. Nobody can stop it. So why we don't just know this final reality, which is Brahman, which is the truth of everything, and why we can't just, bypass the world, which is mithya anyway. So this is something which many people, may think that once you come to Upanishads, you don't have to think about the world because anyway you are here not to engage in mithya world, but to find the Satya. But actually, in reality, things are not as simple as they sound. Why? Because this Brahman, without undergoing any change, the Upanishads say that what it manifests as Jagat. And that Jagat is Nama Rupatmika Jagat, and it is manifestation. When you look at Brahman from the standpoint of the universe and the standpoint of the creation, it is Ishwara, the cause of the universe, without undergoing any change, right? Swarupa Atyagena, then what there is this whole status which is Ishwara. Now, Ishvara is, it has empirical reality. What it means is that the Jagat that we see is not an illusion. It is something which enjoys Vyavaharika Satta. It enjoys a certain empirical reality. So this is why any human being, right, who's a mumukshu, who wants to know the final truth, first has to settle account with the world. So our teachers, Pujya Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who was such an amazing teacher of Vedanta, he used to always tell us, you cannot bypass the world. You have to settle account with the world before your buddhi can understand Brahman, right? That your true nature and Ishvara's true nature. So this is why. And how do you, how do you settle account with this Jagat? So this Jagat, which is what we call Ishwara Srushti, time, space, objects, they are all very intelligently put together, and they have capacity to interact with each other. So this Jagat, right, from our perception, when we start, with the study of Bhagavad Gita or Upanishad, it seems to us like a scary Jagat, right? There are all kinds of things happening all the time. As I told you, both at macro level, micro level, there's always something or the other going on. And so we had COVID, and then we have black fungus, and then there was some kind of a war, between Palestine and Israel. So it is too many things happening. And this is not the first time that it happens. It is something that, since I was born, I have seen so many events. Every decade, there has been some event or the other, right? So this is why it will never stop. So, and when we look with our own perception, it seems to us like a scary Jagat, unpredictable. And at the same time, we have our fears, we have our insecurities, we have our anger, we have a feeling of, not totally at ease with ourselves, or we can hold resentment towards others. So that means we do not live in Ishwara Srushti, we on Ishwara Srushti, which has Vyavaharika reality, what we do is we superimpose our own reality, and this is what we call Pratibhasika. So that means we live from Jiva Srushti. So, what is the nature of the pursuit? The nature of the pursuit is we first have to reduce the Jiva Srushti in our own head and begin to live from Ishwara Srushti, which is a benign Srushti, which is generous, which is spectacular, which has wonders, right? And we have to begin to see the world like that. And then what happens is that we are ready, because now the world which used to scare us is no longer something which threatens you, because you see nothing but presence of Ishwara. And when you see nothing but presence of Ishwara, then what happens is Ishwara reveals its final truth. The truth of Ishwara is also Brahman, and your truth is also Brahman. This which is revealed through scriptures, that begins to be clear to us. Until then, it only remains academic, it remains something remote, it remains something which, or we may hide our non-understanding behind scholarship and quoting and all, but that vision does not yet become our vision. It doesn't become assimilated until the time that we settle account with Ishwara and begin to live in this empirical world, Vyavaharika world, which is manifestation of Ishwara effectively. So now the question is, what is the relationship of all this with COVID? Well, the relationship of all this with COVID is that a time like COVID, where everything that we know and everything that we have taken for granted gets shaken, it's a good time for us to, assess ourselves in terms of our maturity, in terms of our antakarna shuddhi, how far we are in our pursuit, right? And how well we are able to handle difficult situations, and what kind of composure we have. So this is what it's a good, a kind of a signpost for us to assess where we are. Now, what the first thing that we need to ask ourselves is, there is a Gita verse, and that is a beautiful verse. And so many verses in the Gita talk about who becomes a wise person and what kind of preparation is required. So there is a nice, it says in the values, it belongs to chapter 13, and there are 20 values which are given in Bhagavad Gita. And one of these values is Nityam cha samachittatvam ishta anishta upapatishu. Right? So now what does that value mean? It means that the person who wants to know the final reality has to maintain a certain composure in what situations which are ishta and anishta. So everything in this world doesn't happen our way. So things happen, sometimes there are 4 kinds of result. One is equal to what we want. One is more than what we want. There are people who succeed in life. Then sometimes it is opposite of what we want. And sometimes it is less than what we want. So obviously, where would you put this COVID crisis? The opposite. Nobody at the beginning of 2020, if anybody had asked you or me, what is the year going to look like? Nobody had any clue that the whole year and even 21, half of it is gone, and it's going to be completely different from what we had expected. Anishta, nobody hopes to see so much suffering around. Nobody wants to live under the fear. So this is the thing that now the critical thing is, how much are we able to keep our composure, which is real composure and not a fake composure. So this is why I was reading one book where they were talking about that in a time like crisis, we have coping mechanisms. And we have four different types of coping mechanisms. One is that what you are, you get over occupied. So what you overfunction. So what is this overfunction? That you keep yourself so busy in the work, and so that is your way to not deal with the reality which is out there. But at the same time, you work extremely hard, and you also put pressure on others, and you also get stressed out. And that stressful person, and at times behaves, you panic, buy things, you keep hoarding things. So I was just hearing that some people were telling me, and I was actually quite surprised that some people have taken two vaccines already in India. And maybe they have, even though they are not above 60, they kind of found a way to take two vaccines. And now they are going to the US for summer. Summer has come, so they are going to the US. So they were contemplating about taking two more Pfizer vaccines just to be 100% sure. So this is what we call, overprotective, over hoarding. Getting to this is panic, decisions. So these are things which are very, very common. So in these times, how are we behaving, right? This is called overfunction. Now, there are some other people who have a different coping mechanism. And what is that? The other is underfunction. So underfunction means that we are paralyzed. We are not able to perform anything. We keep whole day looking at, this news and constantly gathering information after information after information. And, as though, and also in that also mostly what happens is we begin to criticize, this one did not do things right and that one did not do things right, and they constantly with fear and dissatisfaction, and at the same time unable to function and do things and get things accomplished. So this is a second coping mechanism in the time of crisis, which is underfunction. Now, this is in terms of doing. And then there is another thing, which is an emotional response. So the third response can be emotional withdrawal. That you are so shocked, but you just want to keep yourself, a little bit withdrawn. You don't want to show your emotions, but you want to protect yourself, and you go into your own little cocoon. Now, it may seem as though you're coping well because you're not bothering anybody. You are just in your little corner. But what is now, many psychologists and even in the newspaper, they tell that this is the time that people around you need support. So this is why it's one thing to go into your own little shell and keep on, emotionally disconnect yourself from anybody because you don't want to deal with the difficulties. But what it does is that you're not available to support people when they need you the most. So this is what we call emotional withdrawal. And that is as problematic as the other one, which is the fourth one, which is emotional outbursts. What are these emotional outbursts? You get irritated, then, statistically, they are showing that domestic violence has increased because of COVID. The people are all sitting at home and they don't have many outlets and they are all with each other. So this is where, your anger can come out, your blaming can come out, passing all these unverified messages which malign people or government, and all those behaviors come out, gossip comes out. So this is where what happens is that these are the four responses that people generally have. Now, if you want to, see how you are behaving. So what is a sign of a mature person? The mature person is the one who's able to recognize the situation out there. And the first thing that we have to learn to do is put our own house in order. This is something which is extremely important. Certain amount of concern is absolutely legitimate and it is necessary. Otherwise, what will happen is we will just without putting masks, we will just start going out, we will do indulge in things. So it is not about that. Of course, certain responsible behavior, certain precaution is required. But at the same time, you are not totally gripped with fears, not gripped with anxiety. You're not overworking and passing on stress to others. So this is something that we need to make sure that we have proper response. And that proper response is constructive engagement, right? So you can do something to nourish yourself. You can actually also engage in prayers. So you can convert the fear that you have, the anxiety that you have, into prayers where you can wish others well. And you can also pray for the general well-being of people. This is something which is very important. This is how we cross our own kind of personality barriers and move forward and evolve in life. These are the situations actually give us a huge opportunity to make quantum jumps in our behaviors, right, and in our maturity. So this is what we call, this is the first thing that we all can do, which is to see where we are, right? This so-called indifference is also not the right behavior. And this is what we call, sometimes, this, our teacher used to say that everything is Brahman and, it is unaffected, becomes a kind of we begin to have indifference towards the world. But this is not how the wise person is described. And that is very clear because there is a second thing which the Shastras talk about a lot. And that is not only you need to keep your own house in order, but Shastra talks about compassion, empathy towards others. So there is the chapter 12 of the Gita, fourth verse, there is specific mention of that. Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. So what does it mean? The person who wants to know the reality is the one who matures, right? And who is the real devotee? The real devotee is the one who actually, either extends one's help, and when others are happy, the person derives one's happiness. Now, in the third chapter, Lord Krishna in Karma Yoga talks about, there is a beautiful idea, and that is yajna. So what is yajna? Yajna is a Vedic ritual where you actually recognize your connection with the sun, with the moon, with the waters, with the air, with everybody around you. So that is, and you physically show your gratitude towards everything. Now, in the third chapter, Lord Krishna says that the whole universe is a yajna. What does it mean? We are all connected to each other, and what others do, it counts, it makes a difference in our life. And what we do and how we engage with the world, it's not only about us, it also has a big impact on the world itself and the different people. So through our actions, we influence people. And some of the people are known to us, and some of the people that we influence are even unknown to us. And that influence can go on for generations. So what Lord Krishna says is that you receive a lot from the world. If you want to figure out how much you receive from the world, simple thing, that your meal, right? You eat one meal and think about how many people contributed to make that meal possible for you. So you will have all the forces, you will have farmers, you will have, the transporters, you will have retailers, you will have vendors, you will have your own cook if you have. So that means numerous people participate in one activity of yours, which is one simple meal. Now, just as many of them, you will never know who are the people, your education, right? How many people contributed for you to get educated and do whatever you are doing. So this is the understanding of Yajna. Now, as people's actions help us. So, what Lord Krishna is saying in the third chapter is that we also have to learn to be a participant in this universe. You are not here to just avail services of everybody and just be a consumer and keep taking and only be dissatisfied. Just as you receive from so many people, it becomes your duty to give back. And this is this whole thing about compassion, empathy, expansion. This is so important for somebody who is, seeking to know the final truth. Now, so COVID time is a very important time for us to think about what have I done so far? Not only to keep my own self busy with whatever constructive activities, but how have I reached out? So many things can happen, and there are so many opportunities that we have in order to make a contribution. So let me, and through this contribution is what we expand as human beings. We become more noble and we begin to live in this world more from Ishwara Srushti and less from Jiva Srushti, who's frightened, who's protective, who is only thinking about oneself. And we reach out and we do things for others, right? So let me give you a few examples which I myself have heard, and it has really touched my heart because I'm a teacher and I meet many people. And what are the stories? I just want to share a few stories with you, right? So the first is that I know one doctor and he is a specialist, so right now so he does a lot of surgery and consultations and all, but right now all these other surgeries and all procedures, they are not really everybody's scared, nobody wants to go to the hospital, so those are not very much done anymore. So I was asking him, I said, so how are you now? And he told me that there is not one day that I have not gone to the hospital and I have helped in COVID ward. So that means that doctor being a specialist in something totally orthopedic surgeon, he has got nothing to do with COVID, but he went every day risking his own life, risking his family members because, they're highly contagious. You never know. You can give it to people around you, but he never thought about that. He says, when so many people are suffering and that there are so much, we are so understaffed, how can I sit at home? And I was so moved by that, right? And it came so naturally. He was not even feeling proud. I mean, that was just so, by the way, that how can I do that? It's just impossible. Now, there is a second one where I was approached, where somebody had organized, and what they told me is that these frontline workers, they are extremely overworked. So they are so overworked, they hardly get any sleep. But more than that, right? They see some patients dying. And it's very hard to see all these people who come and within few days they are gone. And not only that, so they are overworked, there is an emotional trauma. And at the same time, there is fear for themselves and their family members, right? Because they are in close contact with all these people. And then when they go home, they have to come into some contact with their family members. So somebody was saying that these frontline workers are under so much stress. So we are offering them some counseling service, little prayer, little meditation. Somebody is there to care for them. So they asked me if I could offer my services, and I said, "My God, this is a privilege." that sitting at home, if I can actually, help these frontline workers who are overworked and working under so much stress, that would be my privilege. So, but people are taking initiative and connecting people, right? So this is something that the people reach out, and they are so creative in finding how they can help. The third one is, I think some of you may have heard of it, a very a popular figure in Bombay. He started a movement of what we call Ghar Bhejo. So during the first lockdown, he had actually gone to serve, to these migrant workers. They had a lot of issues. They could not go home. So he decided that he wanted to serve them meal, and he didn't want to just send the food. He wanted to personally go and see them and distribute food. And when he went to meet these migrant workers and give them food, he saw that they had no place to live. They had no shelter because they couldn't pay the rent, and they were just stranded on the streets and not knowing, and they desperately wanted to go home, but all the public transport was closed. So he used his he was a well-known person, so he used all his kind of a little bit influence he had to send lakhs of the migrant workers home. And what he said is that, it is not at all planned. He just went and he saw the plight, and it all just happened. This is what we call, the minute you start doing your bit, Ishwara comes and helps you to do hundreds of more things. So this is where you see a simple person turning and doing something so big. And he says that today, he was interviewed, and he says, today I know why I have come, and why, on this earth, and what is I always used to think, what exactly is the purpose of my life? And now he says, if I can be of some help to somebody, it gives me so much satisfaction, so much, feeling that, that I have some purpose in life, and my life is meaningful because it makes a difference in somebody else's life. So this is then some very heartwarming stories I have heard. And one was, I did some corporate seminars because, this is the time that employees are a little panicky, and, the employers want to do something good for them. So when I was doing Swamiji's book, Value of Values, to a company online, and one of the employees told me that in the other company that he knows, the boss, the owner of the company, he sold 5 acres of land that he had to be able to pay salaries to their workers, and not to make it half or not to stop paying. And somebody said, generally, what if you have some money and you give, but to sell a land in order to be able to pay the employee salary is something which is quite amazing. And so when that person was asked, he said, like, wow, you are so generous. And the way he replied is that, hey, all this land and this luxurious life that I have been able to achieve all this because of tireless working of so many people. So many people have contributed to my company being what it is. Now, when they are in trouble, how can I just disown them and leave them? So these are simple people, but highly and very humble, no show. And it's just very spontaneous and reaching out and what paying salaries so that nobody has to suffer. And not with any sense of, oh, I'm so great, but I can't but do this. I have benefited so much from them. Now my time has come to give back. Then one more story I want to give, which is also a sweet. These are all the people that I know, and the people who are studying with me, and but how things are mobilized. And that is very, very heartwarming. And the last story that I would like to tell is that one of my students, she has teenage kids, right? So they are 16, 17 years old. And in her whole area, so she gave them a job. So what is their job? To make sure that everybody, so that the people who are, educated and all, they know how to take care of themselves and how to get COVID and, get themselves registered and go and take shots. But many of these people who are just domestic, drivers and working and security and all, many of them may or may not know how. Nowadays, everybody is pretty savvy, but they may not know how to register themselves and how to make an appointment to go for COVID and all. So her two kids were in charge, and they both had to ensure that in the whole neighborhood, every person who was working, was employed in home and domestic as domestic help, they all got registered and they all got the vaccine provided they met that age criteria. So this is the time to reach out. So this not throughout the Bhagavad Gita and also in Upanishad, compassion is one thing which is so much praised, because it is the compassionate human being, a caring human being who sees everything, and not everybody is separate from one another, and who is able to reach out. This is the one who actually, deserves knowledge and gets to know this final truth. So this is where I want to tell one last story, and that is from Kathopanishad. So Kathopanishad, how this, even Upanishad through a story emphasizes what kind of person deserves this knowledge. So in Kathopanishad, there is this little boy of 11 years old, and he ends up being, with Lord Yama, and he has a dialogue. So I don't want to go very much in detail because I see it's already 45, so I have only 5-10 minutes remaining. So I don't want to spend too much time, but this Nachiketa, in his dialogue with Lord Yama asks him for 3 boons. And the first boon was that let my father be well. He must be worried that I have come in to see you. So let him be well. And when I go back, let him not hold any grudge against me. So that means he was thinking about his father. Father's well-being, 11-year-old boy, right? Then the second boon he asked for is, he asked for a ritual for general public. He says that, in this Prithvi Loka, people suffer, but they all are looking forward to going to Swarga. So you give me that ritual which will help people to gain better lives. So that is what expansion. He is not only thinking about himself, he's thinking about general well-being of people, how to release the pain and suffering for people. And the third boon, he's such a clever boy, he saves for himself when he asks for this Brahma Vidya. And he says, you give me that knowledge which will free me from this, samsara, which will free me from all forms of limitation. But that Nachiketa, his 2 boons are for others. So this is the second thing that we all have to do. We have to ask ourselves this question: what have I done? What have I done to reach out and to do my part in this cosmic yajna of Ishwara, which is going on, because I need to grow, right? And I need to expand. Now, there is a final thing, and that is a little bit deeper thinking. And the little deeper thinking is that looking into the cause of all these crises, right? So it may seem to you that wars, right? These are the things, murders. So these are the things that we human beings create, right, through our own use of free will, violence, all of that, right? But when it comes to the nature, like pandemic, diseases, right, cyclones, tornado, so that means it's an act which is an act of Ishwara. And we, which is, and too many forces, so therefore we have little, we don't do anything to cause these events. Well, it is true that it is not that directly, we have, but it is true also that how we behave, it actually has a major, we do participate in even these big cosmic events. Now, if you look at, there are nice, how we as human beings, we have lived on this earth. And if we look at how has our participation been, so we have done things like, mindless deforestation, emission of pollutants in the air, contaminating waters, and dumping wastes in our rivers and in our oceans, exploiting natural resources like to satisfy our insatiable consumption. So that means we have behaved as though we own this earth, and we can treat anything, whether it is the natural resources or the animals or the plant kingdom, the way we want, and exploit the most in order to enjoy our life and to make it as comfortable as possible. So this is something which has been a little bit of an attitude of a human being in its relationship with the world. Now, I saw some interviews by very famous authors who have written books like *Sapiens* and very bestsellers, international bestsellers, and also 10 Lessons from COVID Crisis. And all these great authors, right? They all say the same thing, that if we look at all these crises, it's not that we have no role to play. We have, our participation has actually contributed to these crises. So in one of them says that we have, what we have done is, let's look at how we have treated the animal kingdom. So we have domesticated, human beings have domesticated animals, and castrating them, and gaining total control over them. And also then livestock industry. In livestock industry, what they are all made to stand in one place. They are not able to graze, and then very inhuman conditions. Then they are injected with hormones to make them grow. And because of deforestation, what has happened is, where we live and where the animals are, the distances are reducing. Then to the livestock industry, what we do is we give them injections so that they don't get any diseases. And those antibiotics that we give, what he was saying is that the antibiotics are strong, so they fight away the weaker bacteria and viruses. But what happens is the strong ones survive, and that ultimately they impact us. So this is why COVID is one. But previously, we all have seen bird flu. We have seen swine flu. We have seen mad cow disease. These are all the diseases which are passed on from livestock industry. And we are mindless in how we treat the animal kingdom. So this is what we do need to understand, is that if we continue to behave like this, so Even COVID, now some people say now nobody knows exactly whether it is in the lab or it is through bats, we don't know. But the relationship, two things, ecology, the mindless cutting of the trees and reducing the distance between humans and animals, and then livestock industry, where we are so cruel to the animals, and then what these diseases happen. And when these kind of diseases happen, what is our response? Kill all the chickens because now there is bird flu. So we further eliminate and we further eradicate them. And that is something which is so, we go on increasing our cruelty. And what do Upanishads say? Upanishads say, hey, when you see this, all you think this the trees are something different from me. The animals are different from me. The nature is meant for my consumption. Hey, Upanishads remind us, Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam. The entire universe with all these forms are manifestation of Ishwara. So this is where if we do not respect the Ishwara's creation, if we do not respect the manifestation of Ishwara, then what happens is this: we cannot be the winner because you can choose your actions, but you can't free yourself from the consequences of action. So I see Nitin. So my last line, Nitin, right? But then I will close. My last line is that the Upanishads talk about ahimsa paramo dharma, right? That means that what? Hey, this whole manifestation, Ishwara, do the least harm possible. Be conscious, be alert. And in fact, the Upanishads, the way they, when you begin to understand the presence of Ishwara everywhere, not only you will do the least harm, but you will begin to have reverence towards nature. This is why in Vedic culture, we revere the sun, we revere the waters, we revere the mountains, we revere cows, we revere everything because we understand everything to be manifestation of Ishvara. So not only the person who wants to know this knowledge, but everybody of us, all of us who wants to live a meaningful life, who wants to live a responsible life, we can't escape the teaching of Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads, of which Adi Shankaracharya has written brilliant commentaries. So with this, I will end the talk.
Thank you very much, Neema ji. That was a very positivity generating talk. I can put it that way. So I think that is much needed, especially in this second wave of pandemic, where everywhere lot of lot of ugly and a lot of bad news is coming up.
Yes.
And I have a question, my own question, before I
Yes.
go take up one or two audience questions. We are almost out of time. Uh, you know how the way the people, how the introverts think and react to situation is slightly different from how extroverts react to situations. So in this context, do you think Vedanta has a different suggestion or a different advice to introverts as against extroverts to deal with the pandemic?
Yeah. So this is good. There are differences in people, right? There are some people who are a little introvert, so they don't you go out so much, and some people are more extrovert. But compassion doesn't see introvert or extrovert. Introvert and extrovert is with reference to how much you want to go out and you want to talk, and how much you want to socialize. Reaching out is an act which is required, because that shows sensitivity of the mind. One thing is a personality, which is how much you want to spend time with others and how much you want to socialize. The other thing is human heart and empathy. human heart and empathy. You can choose your own method, right? So suppose you are a little introvert, you don't want to talk to frontline workers, and maybe that is not your style. You can always find something else. Distribute food when you don't have to come in touch with them, but that is not a kind of a uh, uh, you know uh, uh, reason for you not to reach out if you are an introvert, right? And even emotionally, when somebody is suffering, even within your own family members, right? You can say, I'm an introvert. You are introvert. You can just go and hold that person's hand. You don't need to talk too much, and show your support and show that you care. There are so many different expressions of care, right? It all doesn't, introverts and extroverts can have different expressions, but the care has to be there. Compassion has to be there. Otherwise, it's not enough, right? That's not enough because you're not growing enough.
Thank you, Neemaji. One of the questions we have received is that how can we institutionalize the issues you have raised, namely empathy for animals, concern for environment, etc., so that the dangers of pandemic and other things are avoided? Can we institutionalize this Vedantic teaching of developing compassion and empathy and other?
Yeah, it's I would really love to, and I think the government is a little bit institutionalizing by saying, even just today I heard that even in Assam, I think they are going to ban the this killing of cows and all. But unfortunately, what happens is, in India, especially, everything gets so politicized and everything becomes like, so this is a little bit of a problem. But what we can do is, the one thing is government policy, but within your own home, right? That is also an institution within your own company, right? So we can create these small centers where we have our sphere of influence. So when things begin to change at a micro level, there will be sufficient kind of a movement where one day major changes can take place. I think the government is doing its best to make some of these strategic changes. And instead of criticizing, we have to support. But in addition to that, right, whether we criticize or support is not enough. We have to create our micro institutions, whether it is our home, our community, and we begin to talk about these things. In my classes, I do, I spread these ideas, because otherwise what happens, Vedanta becomes, oh, Brahman and Mithya and Maya. But these are so important aspects, because without this, the final vision is inaccessible. So we have to connect it. It's a need of an hour. It's good for us, it is good for the world, and we will get blessing of Ishwara.
That's a wonderful way to put it, Neemaji. I think if I may add, education is another sector where there's a serious lacuna. If students are introduced to these ideas of dharma and Vedanta, the Samanya Dharma, the Niyama, Yama, and all those things, so then the perspective towards life itself changes, and that is where we are seriously lacking.
Absolutely. So I'm doing my best. Of course, I give private classes, so lots of people come, but sometimes people come and tell me that do things for teenagers, so I do private programs. But I would love it, Swamiji's books like Value of Values, they are so universal, and there are 20 values from Bhagavad Gita. If kids are taught, right, at a younger age, and in a not, it doesn't have to be all very traditional way. So this is where also I think we have to, Swamiji himself was a thinker, and he says we don't want to be orthodox, we want to be forward looking. So we have this amazing knowledge with us, and if we just keep the same form and the same thing, then what will happen is that but if we are innovative and without changing the content, right? If we make it relevant and we speak the language, then what will happen is our our knowledge, which is an amazing knowledge, not only what it will reach India, it will reach the world. And this is where I see and I congratulate Hari Kiranji, because that is his attempt to actually bring up the profile of Advaita. It's not only among some mumukshus and some people who are seeking for the final thing. The whole world has to know this knowledge because it is too profound. It is too critical for everybody's well-being. And we can give different parts because it has many different parts, and we can choose what to give to what audience, right?
Thank you, Neemaji, for those wonderful comments and a very excellent and positivity generating session. On the behalf of entire Advaita Academy and all our audience, we express our gratitude for this session, and we extremely enjoyed it. I'm sure all the audience have found it very useful and insightful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Viewers, with this, we come to a conclusion of this session. Tomorrow morning, we have a very excellent talk by Srinivas ji on a Vedanta view on karma and karma phalam. He's a traditional scholar, and he will be enunciating upon the topic at 7 a.m. in the morning. If you have not registered, please do register. You need to register separately for morning and evening sessions. You will find the links on our website. Please visit Advaita Academy website or on our YouTube channel or Facebook. You will find the links. Thank you. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha.